The neural interface buzzed against Zirac Voss's temple as the encrypted message materialized in his visual cortex. Another job, another target, another hefty payment to his anonymous account. His cybernetic fingers, each one precisely calibrated, for maximum lethality, scrolled through the details with mechanical precision. Target, Dr. Sarah Chun. Human female, age 34. Occupation, kindergarten teacher. Location, New Eden Colony. Kepler 442b. Threat level, minimal. Zirac's enhanced eyes processed the information in microseconds. A teacher on a frontier colony. The client Nexus Corporation, judging by the encryption signature, claimed she'd witnessed something that threatened their operational security. The payout was substantial enough to buy a small moon, which meant either she'd seen something catastrophic or Nexus was feeling particularly paranoid. He'd eliminated presidents who commanded fleets, crime lords who could level cities and genetically, enhanced super soldiers who could tear apart tanks with their bare hands. A kindergarten teacher would be laughably easy, perhaps even insulting to his reputation, if he cared about such things, which he didn't. Zirac Voss cared about three things: credits, efficiency, and remaining the galaxy's most feared assassin. His ship, the Shadowbane, slipped through hyperspace like a whisper of death. The journey to New Eden took 3 days, during which Zirac performed his usual ritual, maintaining his weapons, calibrating his cybernetic enhancements, and reviewing his target's psychological profile. Sarah Chun appeared unremarkable, an education graduate from Earth who'd volunteered for frontier service. No combat training, no military background, no connections to criminal organizations. The colony itself was equally unremarkable. New Eden squatted on the edge of civilized space, a collection of prefabricated buildings housing miners, farmers, and other hardy souls trying to carve out a living on humanity's expanding frontier. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Elsa's business, where secrets were harder to keep than livestock. Zirac's reconnaissance drones painted a detailed picture of the settlement. 47 buildings, 212 residents, minimal security. The school sat at the colony's heart, a converted warehouse where the next generation learned to read, write, and dream of worlds beyond their dusty home dot as his ship entered the system's asteroid belt. Zirac began his final preparations. His rifle, a custom-built marvel of death that could punch through armored hull plating, was cleaned and loaded. His targeting software was updated with the latest atmospheric data. His escape route was memorized down to the MICROSECOND, Dr. Sarah. Chun would be dead within the hour. The rifle's scope revealed something Zirac hadn't expected. The classroom was full, not just with human children, but with a menagerie of young aliens that represented a dozen different species. Through the reinforced windows, he could see tiny figures scurrying about, their movements tracked by his targeting computer with cold precision. A Catharian cub, no more than 5 years old, struggled with something at his desk, his massive paws, already showing the claws that would one day make him a formidable predator, fumbled with what appeared to be shoelaces. Catharians were warriors, born and bred for combat. Zirac had killed 17 of them in his career, each one a brutal fight that had pushed his cybernetic enhancements to their limits. But this one was crying out Dr. Sarah. Chun knelt beside the cub, her movements gentle and patient. She guided his claws through the motions, her voice too soft for Zirac's audio pickups to capture across the distance. The cub's frustration melted away as she worked with him, and when he finally managed to tie the laces himself, his roar of triumph was so loud it vibrated through the building's walls. Zirac's finger hovered over the trigger. The shot was perfect, clear line of sight, no wind interference, target stationary. He'd made more difficult kills in his sleep, but Sarah Chun was already moving to the next child. A crystalline ethereal, her body naturally bioluminescent, was pulsing with rapid flashes of light. The other children were shielding their eyes, clearly distressed by the intensity. In most civilized places, ethereals were required to wear dampening suits to prevent their emotional responses from literally blinding others. Sarah simply sat beside the child, her hand resting gently on the ethereal's shoulder. She began to breathe slowly, deeply, and gradually the child's flashing dimmed to a soft, steady glow. The teacher's patience was absolute. No frustration, no impatience, no hint that she'd rather be anywhere else. Targeting window closing, his rifle's AI announced in his neural implant. Target is mobile. Recommend repositioning. Xeric didn't move. Through his scope, he watched Sarah help a Centauri child sound out words in Standard Galactic, celebrate a young Gorvak's first successful finger painting, and comfort a tiny vegan whose homesickness was making her scales change color uncontrollably. These were the children of warriors, traders, refugees, and immigrants. Species that had been at war with each other for millennia, whose adults couldn't share the same space without bloodshed. Yet here they were, learning together, playing together, being shaped by this one human woman's unwavering compassion. The scope tracked Sarah's movements as she moved from child to child, and Xeric found himself cataloging not potential kill shots, but moments of kindness. When had he last seen such gentleness? When had he last created anything instead of destroying it? 3 days passed, and Xeric hadn't taken the shot. He told himself it was tactical, observing patterns, learning routines, waiting for the optimal moment. But the truth was more disturbing. He couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. He'd repositioned twice, finding different vantage points around the colony. Each location offered perfect killing opportunities, and each time he'd watched Sarah Chun turn potential violence into moments of learning and growth. During recess, he'd observed a fight break out between 2 children, a human boy and a young Rigelian whose natural aggression had been triggered by a perceived slight. In any other context, such a confrontation would have ended in serious injury or death. Rigelians were genetically programmed for violence, their entire culture built around concepts of honor and conflict. Sarah had stepped between them without hesitation. She'd knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with the young Rigelian, and, spoken in his native Tunga language, Xeric recognized as incredibly difficult for non-Rigelians to master. The child's aggression had melted away as she acknowledged his feelings while redirecting his energy toward more constructive outlets. She's teaching them to be better than their nature, Xeric murmured to himself, not realizing he'd spoken aloud until his ship's eye. I responded. Clarification required. Please specify subject of analysis. He ignored the AI and returned to his observation. Sarah was reading to the children now, her voice carrying across the playground as she told them a story about a princess who saved her kingdom, not with a sword, but with kindness. The alien children hung on every word, their young minds absorbing lessons about compassion, forgiveness, and the strength found in gentleness. Xeric's cybernetic memory banks contained detailed profiles of every species represented in that classroom. He knew their weaknesses, their killing points, their cultural vulnerabilities. He'd studied them to better eliminate their adult representatives. But watching their children learn and grow under Sarah's guidance, he realized he'd never truly understood them at all. That evening, his routine surveillance picked up something else. Pirates, a small raiding party approaching New Eden under cover of darkness. The colony's defenses were minimal. A few aging security drones and a handful of armed colonists. Against even a small pirate crew, they wouldn't stand a chance. Xeric's first instinct was professional detachment. Pirates would complicate his mission, but they weren't his concern. He'd wait for them to pass, then complete his contract in the aftermath. But as he watched the school through his scope, seeing the soft glow of Sarah's lamp as she worked late into the night preparing lessons for tomorrow, something in his chest felt tight, unfamiliar, almost like concern. For the first time in 30 years, Zirek Voss was experiencing doubt. Asterisk. The pirates struck at dawn, their ragged ships screaming down through New Eden's atmosphere with weapons blazing. Zirek watched from his concealed position as colonists scattered, some running for shelters, while others grabbed whatever weapons they could find. The colony's defensive systems activated, but they were pitifully inadequate against even this small raiding force. Through his scope, he saw Sarah's response. While others fled, she ran toward the school, not away from danger, but toward the children who would be arriving for classes, unaware of the threat bearing down on them. She reached the building just as the first group of young aliens appeared. On the horizon, their daily walk to school about to become a death march. Without hesitation, Sarah began herding them inside, her arms spread wide as she physically shielded them from the approaching violence. A pirate dropship landed in the school's courtyard, disgorging armed raiders who immediately began scanning for valuable targets. Children, especially alien children, commanded high prices in the slave markets of the Outer Rim. Zirek's targeting computer identified the pirate leader Gorth Kane, a brutal Kitharian with a bounty of 3 million. Credits on his head. 17 heat signatures in the building. Kane growled to his crew. Small ones. Fresh meat for the markets. Sarah appeared in the doorway, still in her teaching clothes, but now standing between the pirates and her students. She held no weapon, wore no armor, possessed no combat training. She had only her conviction and the absolute certainty that she would not allow harm to come to the children in her care. "You can't have them," she said, her voice steady despite the odds. Kane laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Little human, you have no idea what you're dealing with. Stand aside." Or the laughter died as Kane's head exploded in a shower of cybernetic parts and biological matter. Zirek's rifle whispered death from half a kilometer away, the hypersonic round punching through the pirate's skull before the sound of the shot reached the courtyard. The remaining pirates spun in confusion, trying to locate the sniper. Zirek's next shot took down their heavy weapons specialist, followed by their pilot, their demolitions expert, and their communications officer. Each shot was placed with surgical precision, each death instantaneous and merciful, more mercy than they'd ever shown their victims. In 30 seconds, the pirate threat was eliminated. Sarah stood in the doorway, unharmed but shaken, her arms still spread protectively as alien children peered out from behind her. Through his scope, Zirek watched her gather the children close, checking each one for injuries, offering comfort and reassurance. She didn't know who had saved them, didn't understand why the pirates had fallen. She only knew their students were safe, and that was enough. For the first time in 30 years, Zirek Voss had used his skills to protect instead of destroy. The feeling was unsettling and completely addictive. The message from Nexus Corporation arrived 12 hours later. Contract incomplete. Target remains active. Explain delay. Zirek stared at the transmission, his cybernetic fingers hovering over the response interface. For 3 decades, he'd never failed to complete a contract, never questioned an order, never allowed emotion to interfere with business. But as he watched Sarah Chon through his scope, helping a young ethereal practice writing letters in Standard Galactic, he realized he couldn't complete this mission. More than that, he wouldn't complete it. Instead, he began to investigate. His contacts in the intelligence underworld painted a clear picture. Sarah Chun had indeed witnessed something. A Nexus Corporation transport ship dumping toxic waste into New Eden's water supply, poisoning the aquifer that supported the entire colony. She documented it, reported it to authorities, and refused to be silenced by bribes or threats. So they'd sent Zirak to silence her permanently. The files revealed the full scope of Nexus's operations on New Eden. They were strip mining the planet's core, poisoning the environment, and planning to abandon the colony once the resources were exhausted. The settlers, including the children Sarah taught, were disposable obstacles to corporate profit. Zirak's fingers moved across his weapons, targeting interface, but this time he wasn't aiming at the school. His crosshairs settled on the Nexus corporate facility on the colony's outskirts. Through thermal imaging, he could see the executives who'd ordered Sarah's death, the security forces who'd threatened her, the engineers who'd designed the poison systems. 3 days later, the galactic news networks reported a mysterious explosion at the Nexus facility on New Eden. All senior staff were killed, and the toxic waste operation was completely destroyed. Simultaneously, evidence of the corporation's crimes was leaked to every major news outlet in the galaxy. The follow-up stories were equally mysterious. The galaxy's most feared assassin had apparently vanished. Zirak Voss, the killer who'd shaped the balance of power across a dozen systems, had simply disappeared. But Sarah Chun noticed something new in her classroom. Anonymous donations had begun arriving: educational supplies, playground equipment, medical supplies for the colony's clinic. Each package came with a simple note: for the children. She never learned that her guardian angel was a retired assassin who'd found redemption in watching her nurture young minds. She never knew that somewhere in the galaxy, a man who'd spent his life dealing death was now using his skills and resources to protect the innocent. Zirak Voss had resigned from his profession after witnessing something more powerful than any weapon: the transformative force of unconditional love. In a kindergarten classroom on a frontier world, he'd discovered that creation was always stronger than destruction. And in the laughter of children learning to read, he'd found a purpose worth living for. Asterisk.